If we could get underway, please. Okay, thank you very much to everybody for coming. If we could, please, I feel like I'm getting in touch with my inner substitute school teacher. If everybody could come together, please. Thank you very much. First of all, I want to thank everybody for coming out. I know grades were due yesterday, and there's still some grading to do, so the committee in general, and I also particularly appreciate you coming out for this. This is what we envision would be the first of many times that we'll try and get back to the faculty with where we are and where we've been and where we hope to be going, and we'll be looking for faculty input and discussion along the way. And so today is really the first part of the process, and a big bulk more will be done in the upcoming year. So first off, we want to let you know a bit where we are and how we got to where we are. And yeah, if you press the right button, it comes on. So for this part of it, I'm going to ask Penny and Cheryl to come up and talk for a couple minutes and introduce how we got to where we are, and then we'll talk a bit about the process, and then we'll get to the draft learning outcomes. And then if you wear that, you get on the video.
I do what?
You put that around your neck.
Okay. Is this the microphone?
Yes.
Okay. Do I have to put it around my neck?
Yes.
I don't like things around my neck. Okay, there we go. Can everybody hear me? Okay. All right. Okay. So we thought it would be helpful to give just a little bit of background, and I know there's been a lot of questions about the whole process and how things have been moving forward with the committee, and I can promise you that we've been working really hard, even though it seems like it's taken a long time for us to get to this point even. But the process really started when we went through the Middle States self-study. And so one of the things we had to look at was, our core curriculum and whether or not it was meeting the standards for Middle States, and truly whether or not it was meeting what we wanted it to do. And that's really, we always seem to blame things on Middle States, but truly, Middle States is a good thing in the sense that it really forced us to take a look at some things and to say, is this working for us or isn't it? And there's been a lot of question about the core in terms of whether we've truly assessed it, whether we've truly determined what the core is doing and all of that. And so what we were really charged with as a committee is to look at what we had and to look at what we came up with during Middle States, because we certainly decided in doing that self-study that we needed to go back and really evaluate whether the core was doing what we wanted it to do. But I think some of the misunderstandings is that we really have done a lot of assessment on the core. We have not assessed maybe the core as a whole, which has certainly been a criticism, but we've assessed the competencies, we've assessed parts of the core. And so if you look at what is available on the core assessment page of the website, there really is a lot of assessment that has been done. And so what we really looked at then was, is the core doing what we need it to do in terms of not only the Middle States standards, but our mission and our goals for the organization. And so we looked at a lot of things, not just Middle States, but also some of the AAC&U guidelines. Several of us went to a conference on general education for AAC&U, and so we really tried to look at what does a general education program need to achieve. And the very first thing that we found was that in the last process, when the core was developed, there really were not I shouldn't say specific, there really were not overriding student learning outcomes that determined what do we want students to have achieved by the time they graduate from Damon College. And when we went to these conferences, that was one of the things that came out again and again, that you need to start with student learning outcomes, which, having done curriculum development, makes perfectly good sense to me. So that's where we started. We started with what we're going to work on today is what are the student learning outcomes, where do we want students to be at the end of their careers here at Damon. I think that's all I need to say. Okay. Maybe I said too much, but go ahead. Well, if you have questions along the way, too, please feel free to ask them. Oh, geez, see now. There we go. now I don't want to give it up. And the other thing you see here is we have on the screen here that the Middle States self-study and there's really a mandate for what we're doing on the committee that guides what we do. The other thing that guides what we do is the discussion that's taken place on many committees on this campus over the past decade, really. And Cheryl and I co-chaired the EPC last academic year. We brought forth discussion that had been ongoing for a number of years, both on the EPC and also on the subcommittee of the EPC, the CASC, the Core Advisory Subcommittee, which of course has taken on many of the roles of the previous CIS. Many of you have served on that over the years, one or the other of them. And we use that to really frame within the EPC a discussion, and the structure for that discussion. We wanted to make sure that it was an elected committee that would be accountable to the faculty. We wanted to make sure that it had a clear line of authority from the EPC because it oversees the curriculum. And so in consultation with the VPAA and the members of the EPC, we wrote up a proposal which was reviewed and revised and eventually approved that lays out a very clear charge for our committee. As you all know, that the elections that we held last spring resulted in the election of 8 members of the subcommittee, and then our 9th member is the core director, Sean. So we are on a timeline that is 18 to 24 months. The members of the committee here, as you see, represent a cross-section of the faculty. And we see our role as not just representing individual departments, but really representing the faculty as a whole in that discussion. The charge of the committee, there are several points of the charge of the committee. One of them, as Cheryl alluded to, deals with the question about whether students can demonstrate the skills and competency that we have claimed for our general education curriculum upon completing it. We are also looking at both knowledge and skills. What should undergraduate degree holders possess in the way of a body of knowledge, and also in the ability in the intellectual skills. And our current core talks a lot about skills. It doesn't talk about knowledge. We are charged with considering the impact that the core has had upon various academic units of the college, the role of various academic units of the college in the general education curriculum. So what effect has it had? What role do different departments and academic units have within the gen ed curriculum? And then we are charged with recommending changes in Damon's general education curriculum to address any problems or shortcomings with the current core. A lot of what we're talking about today reflects this last point on the committee charge, examining the alignment between the core curriculum, the college's decision and strategic plan, and the elements of baccalaureate education should be embodied within the college general education curriculum. So we've, among the many meetings that we've had, we have spent considerable time talking about what we claim on the mission statement, what we claim in our educational materials, the reinforcement of the VPAA that this is a liberal arts college. What does that mean? And then making sure that our general education curriculum reflects those things. And I think I probably need to turn things back over to Sean at this point. Any questions for us?
The setup of the committee and what we're trying to do, that sort of thing?
Just a quick question. So in terms of the evaluation of the current core, is that going to be addressed at this point, or is that?
Well, I think, we could have taken 2 different approaches. Okay, one is we looked at what was already assessed, and as we did this self-study for Middle States, we really looked very much at what we've already done by way of assessment of the core. And I think there's been a lot thrown around about whether we have truly assessed the core, and I have to tell you a lot more assessment has been done than most faculty realize, because there was a lot of activity going on, and it was in different places and in different times, but we really did look at the aspects of the core. It's very difficult to evaluate the core as a whole if you don't have these overriding student learning outcomes. We did have, and Mimi helped me find these, we did have some objectives that we had on our website that we said all students must achieve before they graduate from Damon, but they weren't developed in conjunction with the core, and so it's difficult to then say, okay, now we're going to evaluate the core as a whole when we don't have something that says what do we want students to do as a whole. We have a number of competencies, and we were evaluating whether students were achieving them.
And a lot of that, of course, was at the course level. I think that we've all become pretty proficient with course level evaluation of the competencies, and many of us have taken part in the sessions that normally take place right now, right, at this point in the semester or after the semester. But how that all fits together within the whole view is a lot harder.
So I think when we went to various conferences, and really the thing that was most absent in our examination of what we had was we don't have these essential student learning outcomes that we say every student from Damon is going to have achieved when they graduate. And so we felt that that was a really good starting point. And I think the other thing that that came out of Middle States was we said to Middle States, look, there have been some concerns about the core, there have been complaints about the core. I have to say that ever since I came here and then the core was in place, I've heard complaints, but we haven't done anything about it. And so that, I think, really was the impetus for this committee to really look at it more closely. But I think one of the things that we really wanted to stress, and I'm sure that it will be said throughout this presentation, is we want faculty involvement. We don't see ourselves as a committee that's going to step aside and develop something and then give it to you and say, here it is. And that's really why we invited people here today, is because we want to start with what are the things that people think that our general education program should achieve. Let's have those student learning outcomes. And that's just the beginning. People have asked me, what do these represent? This is really just the beginning. We then have to think about what are we going to have in place for students to achieve them. And that's going to be something, I don't want to step on other people's presentations, but that's going to be something we'll discuss too. Does that answer your question?
I think I should listen to that.
Okay. You can let us know.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Magic wand.
There we go. Okay, so a little bit, some of this has been already covered, but a lot of what we did initially in the fall was go through documents that are already in place. And whatever we end up doing, one thing I think the entire committee wants to reiterate is we have a lot of resources on campus that can be used now, whether the course level or learning communities or plus programs or assessment or Middle States reports or all of that. And so we tried to gather a view of a fair amount of that material. Middle States curriculum documents, we looked at assessment data and assessment reports, and Middle States, of course, also spent a lot of time looking at that. So Middle State, we were reviewing some of what Middle States was doing with that. And then one of the things that we tried to do and really did shape a lot of what we did in terms of trying to come up with these learning outcomes, we kept returning to this, is to go to the departments and see what departments said needed to happen in a general education. And from fairly early on, there were a few broad things that everybody said, which is our students need to read better, write better, think more clearly. As soon as we solve that problem, we'll be all set. But that those are the basic issues that come coming up, that for students to get into upper division through general education, they need to have these abilities and skills, but also some body of knowledge, as Penny was talking about. So we spent a lot of time on that, and we continue to go back to those departmental reports. We are also very cognizant that we have a number of programs with very specific requirements. The very last thing we want to do is create an ideal core that many of our students can't take. So that will be very much into consideration. We're not there yet, but that's something that we will spend a fair amount of time going forward with the departmental conversations. We spent a lot of time on the committee trying to understand from people coming from different parts of the school, whether from professional programs or from the business program or from the liberal arts or from the natural sciences, understand each other, communicate with each other, develop a bit of a sense that we were working together. And that took a while, but I think certainly happened on the committee. And we really want to be paying attention to whatever we collectively, us recommending and the faculty, contributing to, how it would affect the program, the college as a whole. We still have a lot more work to do on that. One of the important things that happened is, as Cheryl mentioned, a number of people went to the ACNU conference on general education, and so I'm going to turn the floor over to Dom. I think we all found that a number of people went and reported back to the committee, a very helpful way of not only getting us to frame important issues, but also processes to go forward in a productive manner as well. So I'm going to take this thingamajig off and turn it over to, there we go.
That's really cool. Sorry. All right. Cool. All right. It sees all. All right, so there's been a certain degree of concern, might be a strong word, but a lack of understanding of what the difference between a competency and a learning outcome is. And I think one of the issues and the reason we're here in the first place is because the competency-based core, as it is right now, is ambiguous, I think would be a nice way of putting it. So it's a little difficult to understand. So at this point, we're going to work on learning outcomes, because a competency is very different than a learning outcome. So a competency, as it says here, is looking at knowledge, skills, and abilities to perform critical functions or tasks. Usually this is in a defined setting, so this is very specific. Okay? As well as the second note, which says emphasizes demonstrated mastery of specific and concrete skills. So this is our competency-based core we've had before, where we say, okay, we're looking at course A. Does it have competency A, B, C, D? And then we tick them off. That's what we did before. These are different than learning outcomes. And this is a very important difference, because learning outcomes are not specific to a context of a class. They are not... they really are what we want all of our students to know. Okay, so they need to be able to assess them, etc. But so these are skills or knowledge that will be acquired by a student as a result of instruction in the broad sense. So when we talk about learning outcomes, we're not saying, okay, we want this learning outcome to come from class A and this learning outcome to come from class B and C, etc. Because that's competency. What we want is we want all of Damon's graduates, all of them, to come out saying that they can achieve these outcomes. That's what we want. So they're very broad. So when you look at them, there are going to be certain outcomes that seem a little more specific than others. There are certain ones that can apply to many subjects versus less and more. It's not really a turf war here. We're not looking at, okay, this course needs to satisfy this, that course needs to satisfy that. It's everyone who graduates from Damon, we want them to be able to do these things. Okay, so it's a little more broad. And general education will come as a result of defining these. So essentially what we did is in order to draft the learning outcomes, which is kind of our baby after this year of infighting might be a strong word, just discussion, right? So we looked at our conversations with the departments. I interviewed a few departments. I'm sure all of you had heard from some of our representatives. And then we have best practice reviews. And then we have the current core, and we mixed it all up. And we figured the best place to start would be the learning outcomes. So the best place to kind of to start this whole conversation is to talk about what every student needs to know and avoid the minutia, at least at this point. Okay, so a lot of the issues that we noticed with the competencies we wanted to avoid when it came to the learning outcomes. Okay, so we wanted them to be clear and concise. Obviously, we don't want a lot of gobbledygook that is hard to interpret. Okay, another thing is we need them to be measurable. That is probably the most important thing. We need to be able to assess all of this stuff. So whether you're a nursing student or a nat sci student or a history political science student or an art student or whatever, at the end we want to be able to measure that all of these students, regardless of their track, are able to achieve these learning outcomes. Okay. Another thing is understandable. I mean, effective awareness is the stereotypical example, but with a lot of the competencies, people will complain, both students, parents, and faculty, that it's like it's abstract, I'm not really sure what you're talking about. Well, we wanted to avoid that as much as possible. And we're obviously showing them to you here today, but what we're also going to do is we want to present them to the students as well, and when students look at them, they'll be like, okay, I get it, versus what do you exactly mean by this? So we want them to be understandable. And there's a certain degree of marketing that goes into that, of course. Okay. And also another thing is we wanted to be connected to different disciplines. There shouldn't be any outcomes that are discipline specific. So we can't have a learning outcome that is just, I don't know, natural science. Knowledge of natural science isn't a learning outcome. It's too specific. I'm using my own department because I'm there, but you understand what I'm saying. We can't say, okay, subject, 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 subject. It's not how it works. They need to be broad, and they need to, so whatever your major is or whatever your discipline is, there needs to be a really good chance that you're going to achieve these by the end of your stay. I think that's it. Right?
Diane's coming.
Any questions before I give the robot over?
So anyone over the years who said competency-based, I don't get that. Now's your chance for a big I told you so. And we have, one of the things that as we go forward, there are a lot of different sort of forces or constraints or issues we need to keep in mind. Middle states criteria, New York State Department of Education definition of the liberal arts and the number of requirements that go with that. We used a lot of rubrics from ACNU. One particular university redesigned their core and gave a pre-conference presentation, and a number of people went to that and found that very helpful. Not so much they were going to take theirs, steal it, and put it into ours, but that the process they went to and some general categories that we can use. We read a lot of stuff on core and core revisions and general education, and probably more than many of us want to. So, I read a whole book on general education reform going back to the 19th century, and fascinating, but not a whole lot of help for today. And also, of course, from the departments and the committees, which we also found important and will continue to do so. So those are some of the resources. There's a lot more, but those are some of the resources. Broadly speaking, I sent everybody the learning outcomes. We also, I should also say, there's a number of ongoing faculty committees that have overlap with our committee. And one of the concerns really through the whole year has been to make sure that the various committees are not working at cross purposes. So there's a service learning committee, there's a diversity committee, there's the global task force. I'm probably forgetting. There's the writing people and information literacy people and so on. So what we tried to do is, well, first of all, to make it clear that as we go through this step, we'll make sure we're using these various committees and be in dialogue with them. But also, we tried to share, we got the learning outcomes together fairly late. And so we sent them out to different appropriate committees and got some responses, and we'll get response from them as well. So I was able to get some that we wrote early to Erica and Meg, the information literacy and the writing one. Other ones we got fairly late, so we're just hearing back from these other committees because it came back from grading. And also Global Task Force have proposed their own, and you can see it because I didn't send it to you in advance because we got it to them fairly late, and then they worked on it last week. But they have one. You can tell it's in handwriting. Diane wrote that in handwriting.
I just want to make a comment just based on a question I had yesterday about these. These are not in order of importance.
No.
They are just, I don't even know what order, why we put them in the order we did.
Because we finished some first and others later.
But at any rate, it does not mean the first one is more important than the second or the eighth.
Right. And as much as, equally important, right. So the order is not, this is more important than that, but some of them were a little easier for us to get agreement on early, and then others, once we had a pattern, put together later. So these are the ones. They were around the room. I sent them in advance. I don't really want to take 10 minutes to read each one to you, but broadly speaking, knowledge of the liberal arts, scientific and quantitative reasoning, communication, information literacy, ethical reasoning. These are just the titles. Critical thinking, close reading, diversity and difference, personal and social responsibility, civic literacy. We should notice that while competency model is not without its problems, we're not a million miles away from some of the same things. And my sense is that we have in place a lot of the building, whatever we decide to do, an awful lot of the building blocks, and others would have to be created. But we're certainly not talking about creating everything from scratch. A lot of people in this room and in this college in the last 10 or 15 years have done an awful lot of work creating courses and programs that are doing general education kind of things, and we want to make sure we know we're aware of that, and we intend to incorporate that throughout. Okay, for the next part of it, I'm going to turn this over briefly to Diane, who's going to explain how we're going to begin the discussion part of it, and she gets to wear the magic thing.
And I'm going to dance because I can't. Hey.
And I think, because it struck me as I was sitting here listening, that a lot of people have said over time that there were some very good things about the current core, and I don't want you to think that we've sort of decided that it doesn't have any positives or doesn't have any good things.
Yeah.
So I think what we're trying to do is take those good things and embed them in what we're trying to do now. So I think initially when the email went out and said that we were looking at some new core, that everybody was like, I got emails that said, are you throwing out the old core, or what do you? And so that's really not it at all. I think you'll see as you look at some of the titles of these that they're pretty much a lot of what we've looked at in our competencies. And so we're not suggesting that the core didn't have positives. And truly when we did assessment of the core, the outcomes of the assessment were very positive. And so we're not trying to negate that or suggest that there wasn't anything good about it.
There's a lot positive that we have to work with. Much.
Absolutely. Okay. So a couple of you, as you came in the door, realized that we have Post-it notes and markers and sticky dots and said, oh, is this not a listening meeting? This is a working meeting? It is absolutely a working meeting. Okay. So we've done work over the past year trying to craft these learning outcomes, taking into account all of this information, everything we've learned from conference, feedback that people have, put in our ears, we're walking down the hall, everything, trying to bring that to these draft outcomes that you see around the room. But the most important part is transparency. You, the faculty, are going to have to be the embodiment of this core and these learning outcomes. If we want our students to walk out the door at Daemen College as graduates, these are the skills we want them to have, the knowledge we want them to have, the abilities we want them to have. And so we need your feedback. So what we're going to do is a little facilitated activity. Yes?
I mean, these we think are what so far, after deliberating for some time, like the OJ jury, we decided eventually that this is what we think that students should need. So they're all handcrafted. All the 9 of us, there's no cheese. But they may not be exhaustive. You may think there are some missing. So that's what today's for as well.
Exactly. So today what we're going to do is have you offer your commentary on these. We're going to look at what is missing, what's not included, other comments, hey, you missed this big one. So that's really what this process is about. And again, it's about transparency. It's about getting the faculty involved. So in order to ensure, because we've all been in meetings where some voices are very vocal and some voices are a little bit quieter, some people process a little bit differently, we wanted to make sure that everybody had an opportunity to provide feedback. And the way that we figured we could do that is through the use of Post-it notes. So what we're going to have you do is to go around the room and take a tour of the learning outcomes. We have Post-it pads in the back. We have markers. I'm going to ask that you write in marker because it makes you write a bit bigger so I can type all this a little later. So the idea is you're going to give us feedback on the learning outcomes that you see posted initially. The kind of feedback we're looking for, what do you like about the learning outcome? That'd be great to hear, okay, these things work for us. What don't you like? Which is probably we'll get a little bit more feedback about that, admittedly. What is missing? as Robert was kind of alluding to. How might you go about improving this outcome? You should include this. This should be thrown out. I'm going to ask that you don't mark up the outcomes themselves, start crossing them off and things like that, but to use, please, the Post-it notes as we go about the process. You're going to visit each of the stations, right? It's a small room. There's a lot of you. We weren't sure how many people were coming. But just try to take your time. Please, please, please go through each of them. The printed sheets, because I had them printed earlier, are the ones that the committee came through and vetted. We also have the Global Education Task Force provided us one on integrative global knowledge. That's in the back of the room, and you can see it as well. And we need your feedback on that. Okay? Once we're through this process, while you're doing it, I'm going to give you a random dot, and that will assign you to a group. And those groups will be charged with looking at the Post-it notes and doing a little clustering activity. So where are common comments? Where are things that kind of seem to be patterned? You might have some outliers. You might have some extraneous feedback. You don't really know what to do with. Just put them on there. Keep them on there, okay? But there might be some patterns in the feedback that we're receiving. And we're going to have you, as time permits, do a quick share. Okay? If you didn't know, I'm taking copious notes about everything that's going on in the room. Of course, we're recording as well. Once we're through that, you will report out in your little groups, and I'm going to try to make sure they're pretty random. You're going to report out to the larger group some of the key themes. These are brief. We don't need a dissertation on this learning outcome. We need just some quick points to share with folks. The last thing we're going to do today, aside from our next steps and kind of going through that process, we're going to do some nominal group technique. We're going to do some dot counting. Y'all had Post-it dots in your lives? Yes? No? Some of you smiling, some of you not. So you're going to get 5 dots, and only 5 dots. And you're going to go around and put your dots on the learning outcomes you think are most critical. Because we want to get a little bit of discernment. 10 is a lot. It's a lot, but if we need 10, we need 10. But we want to get a little sense, is there some curvature? Is there this is a little less important to us than this? Okay? And that will be our activity. Is everybody clear on what I'm asking you to do? Yes, you only get 5 dots. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if you want to spend... It's a fair question. It comes up a lot. If you want to spend all your dots on one, that's your prerogative, I guess. But you only get 5. So that's all you get. Okay? Just 2 little housekeeping issues, please, again. Try to put the sticky part of the Post-it note in your handwriting kind of below that. People will flip them, and then they don't stick as easily, so try that. And don't, these are not Post-it pads, so you're fine. Okay. Question in the back. Yes.
I have a question about the process that might inform some of my comments about this. To what extent were you all guided by trying to have the learning objectives connect to our institutional mission statement? To what extent did you guys build from that? We spent a lot of time.
Yeah.
So it's fair for us to see or not see that here?
Hopefully you will see it, but you may not, and you need to tell us if you don't. Okay? And as part of our next steps, we're taking all this feedback, and we'll be working in the summer while you're having your margaritas. Okay, is everybody clear? Yes, another comment. This might be your question, too.
Yeah, and just in terms of anything that's missing.
Yes. Thank you. Yes. So I have another Post-it board in the back for additional comments. This is comments. This is, you missed this one. If there's a desire to put, I brought the pad so we can add more sheets if we need to, but there's an opportunity right by the door to put up any feedback, comments. You missed this one. We need this one. Yes.
I'm sorry. Once you were done,
Yeah.
is it fair to say that you've determined that you can assess each of these in a clean way? So, for example, if somebody misses a question or does poorly in quantitative reasoning, is it safe to say we can differentiate that from critical thinking?
We believe that there is some thought pattern behind each of these, and that we believe that they're accessible. You might tell us that they're not, so that's part of the feedback process. But when we wrote them, we were like, okay, how might we assess this? Is this measurable?
And also in terms of if there's overlap, we did have a number of stages along the way where we would say, this one sounds a lot like that. So
We tried to separate them.
make sure they're separate.
Yeah.
I guess I was trying to think of when you're measuring, usually you have to have very clean and
Right.
separate.
Yes, yes.
Which some of these might.
Yeah. There might be some that kind of bump each other or corner each other, right? Like they might be connected. And you might help us to decide, oh, you don't need this one because this is covering it. So there might be some of that.
They combine, or
Yeah.
Like I'm thinking with the global task force, I'm sure there's going to be overlap with some of the other.
so we should consider that also.
Yes.
Because I'm thinking
Yeah.
if I'm grading a paper and they've got, a quantitative related problem in graph, I mean, there's critical thinking elements of that as well.
Right,
So-
right.
so
And that's,
I have a hard time discerning, I think.
yeah, the difficulty is there is a lesion, right? Like these are, like, learning is not just this box or this box. They slide together. Critical thinking connects with scientific and quantitative reasoning. Those things kind of mesh up against each other. We're just trying to see if this is kind of where we are at, if there's some consensus on these are the things we want our students to learn, and if they are differentiated enough.
And we also put in future steps.
Yes.
In terms of, we're going to, once we have an outline of what we want in these learning outcomes,
Go through here.
then we're going to move forward in our mission.
Do you want separate Post-it notes for each of these?
No, you can
Put everything
Yeah.
in
Oh,
one.
actually, wait. So, an important question just came up. One idea per post-it, if you will. One idea. I don't need an itemized list. And part A, part B, part C. One idea, one per post-it note. Thank you for that. And come and get them. Lots of markers, lots of posties. Not everybody's going to get a pad because it got expensive. Oh, it's all right. I'll stop it. Come and get your posties. You can share pads. You don't need your own private pad. Some people might want one.
Maybe take some of them and have them.
Yeah, or you can kind of cluster a little together and just make sure you go to all of them, please. You need a marker? Marker pen? Okay. Marker pen. Marker pen.
I'm going to go with pink.
Go for it. There you go.
I'll go with yellow then.
Okay. Marker and pen.
So
Marker and pen. I didn't know how many people were coming, so
I'm going to go pink.
go pink. Go pink or go home.
Thank you, honey.
Marker and pen.
I don't think we're participating. I think we're just going to.
Oh, you can if you want to. I think you can. That's my opinion. Check in, but marker and pen. Yeah.
Can we ask for a blank for general issues that aren't related? Oh,
Gotcha.
I wasn't listening. I thought I listened to everything you said. You're a very good speaker. Thank you.
Would you like a?
I actually have to leave.
Okay. All right. If you have any feedback, let us know.
I'll follow around you.
Yeah, and we'll take feedback after. The notes will come out and people can reflect on the notes. So.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Have you guys chatted much? Because, it seems like 11 for professional kids. Too much.
I know.
Do you have an ideal number? 7?
We were at 5 at one point, then we went to 7, then we crept up to 10, then to 11.
But
We don't know. We know we want to reduce, which is why I'm doing the dot thing. So we can kind of see where are the most critical.
You're kind of going back and making these all measurable.
Oh, yeah. So like they're loosely measurable,
Measurable, right, yeah, I was
but
going
they're
that.
not properly measurable yet.
Okay, so one clarification
Yes.
on your instruction. You want us to write below the tape line?
Yes.
Below the
Yes,
key
because
line.
if you do this, it's going to be like this
All right.
on the board. Sad that I say these things,
I got it.
but I'm telling you, when I have to type them all up, I'm going to be cursing everybody's name.
Put this online, and we could have done it on our devices, Dolly. Now you're going to hit me up.
I
You got
was-
a kid you can pay at home? Oh no, your baby's too little.
He's 5. He can't really spell his name yet. No. There was one over here.
Okay.
You're welcome to grab it.
How you doing? Good. How are you doing?
Okay. I got markers and pens. Markers and pens.
So that's where we have science.
I feel like I maybe don't need to wear this right now. Thanks. Hopefully it was clear.
Yeah. And I think what we really need to also I'm thinking emphasize is the process is what we, like, if you're on, stress, this was a good turnout, but let your colleagues know.
And we'll emphasize that.
We're moving this right along, and it's going to be very systematic, and if you don't get input this time, we're not going back, because the thing we learned from Carlo was having this structured system is imperative.
Yes. And to keep it transparent.
You are very good at doing it.
This is I love this stuff. So.
Yeah, well, I can tell.
Yeah. Thanks for coming. All right, how we doing? You getting a pastry? That's good. You must not be overly stressed.
No.
I mean, the only feedback I've gotten so far is that we could have done it online, but I think it's better to have them in the room together. I should probably take this off for a minute. Feel intrusive. Oh, don't look at me, camera. I'm trying to get away from the camera.
Should we stop recording?
Well, people are like, no. All right, can I get everybody again? I'll get loud. All right, so now I know you're eager for the dots. I know the dots are compelling. They're very exciting. But we got one step before we do it. Okay, so what I'm going to do, everybody was either assigned a dot or is in the dotless group. Okay? I tried to keep you from kind of your regular suspects. Like I want you to kind of break it up a little bit here. It's hard to do because we didn't have a proper RSVP. I couldn't properly randomize, which is killing me. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to assign you to a poster. And you're going to use the posties. You're not going to, again, write on the poster board, but you're going to cluster the posties around similar themes, okay? So ideas that kind of go together, you want to bring together, and then you're going to name a spokesperson or spokespersons, and in a few minutes, you'll have an opportunity to kind of share, okay, here's our learning outcome, and here are some of the feedback. Again, this is not, publication quality discussion, okay? Short blasts, maybe 3 ideas max, okay? So a couple of short blasts. The reason we're doing this is to kind of show you the spirit of where this outcome might be moving, okay? To give you a little bit more information so that when you do vote with your dots in just a few minutes, you'll have an inkling, if this one's going to merge with this one, I might put my real estate here, You see what I'm saying? Okay. So, big red dot. Big red dots, raise up. Okay, you're going to go over here. I might have to separate some people. I don't know. Big yellow dots. You're going to take critical thinking. Big yellow dots. Big yellow dots. Big yellow dots. I know there are a few of you. And I might have to, break these up a little bit. Big light blue dot. Yes, it's blue. Light blue dots, light blue dots. You're going to take close reading. Close reading. Okay? Close reading. Big green dot, the sizable green dot, I should say. Your little green. Where's my big? You're going to take personal and social responsibility. And I might add people. Okay, little green dot. You're going to take civic literacy, little green. Tiny green, I should say. They're all kind of little. Little tiny blue dot. You're going to take diversity and difference. Little tiny blue. Okay. Little tiny yellow. Information literacy. Little tiny yellow. There's got to be more of you. Knowledge of the liberal arts is going to be little tiny blue. Oh, no, little tiny red. You're right. Okay, over here. Okay. Who did I not call? Little tiny red? We got, okay. You're a blue dot. No, you're not a blue dot. That's your shirt. Who has a dot still? Okay, if you're playing, raise your hand. If you're participating in this part. So, you three and you go there. This row, you're going to go there. And I'm going to get you into some other groups. So, she's small, so maybe two of you go there.
Okay.
She's tiny and...
You can do it. You can reach. I can't reach.
And how about one of you join here, and then one of you join the second group over there. And are you needing a group? All right. How about? So you can join this group right here. Just trying to even it out. All right, everybody. How about you come over to one of these? Okay. Has everybody got a place to be?
I think so. I think anyone who wants a place to be has got one.
Yeah.
Some people ask, they're like, what about a map? And I go, it's kind of specific.
Yeah, it's discipline specific.
Like,
So we'll see.
Yeah.
And then we're going to cluster this one.
Oh, we are?
Yeah. We're working this one, committee. Committee over here. Committee over here. Mary, over here. Did you get are you in a group? Okay. You could join diversity and difference.
You said Mary?
Yes, please.
That's what I thought.
Come on over. We're working this one.
Oh, okay.
All right, you guys just cluster them. I'm just going to check in, make sure everybody knows what they're doing.
Okay.
You're going to cluster this one because we haven't played with it. You want to walk around with me?
Well,
You can. Yeah, just make sure that they get what they're doing. You can join that one if you'd rather. Okay. Whatever you like. Oh, the step. Oh, yeah. Okay. You guys are good? Any questions for me? You got it. Let me get everybody on camera. Ooh, that is a hard one. I have to explain that every time to my students. Yes. It's important, but tricky. tricky.
They don't understand it, and I teach education, the foundation of education.
Oh my gosh.
So,
You gotta like.
so they ought to know that.
Yeah.
So this is about all the elements, whether it's digital or creative writing.
Great job. Thanks for being safe. Be safe up there. Guys are doing okay? Any questions for me? Right on. All right, do I have to break you guys up? Are they chatting?
Connection there.
He's doing all the work.
Oh, we started.
Oh, you want to?
Are we started already?
Yes, we're started. He's doing all the work.
Okay.
Help him out.
That's a spokesperson.
Okay. I thought you'd be the spokesperson. You guys doing okay? How's the clustering?
They're awesome.
Right on. It's qualitative research. We're looking for key themes. Why not? You sure you don't want to go play? I mean, you don't have to get actively involved. You're comfortable? It's fun to see them interact.
Yeah, that's we're doing our own analysis. We're not really going to summarize.
Yeah. Please do, though. Like, they got to go back on the page at some point. If they're off the page, I can't type them. I am a buzzkill.
Diane, our goal is
no worries. Yeah.
Our goal is then to tell the
What the themes, what the themes are, whatever you think is critical to share, because I want people to have a little insight as to where we might move before they pick. And the thing is, guys, it's really all of them together is we want our students to walk out with, right? Like, this is, so we're trying to not overlap too much, but, kind of come up with a streamlined set.
So the student
How goes?
fill out a
Okay,
rubric.
awesome, great. Oh, you're done. So tell them. They're like analyzing each quote. Guys doing all right? I'm just checking in. We're good?
People talking, at least people won't feel like they just sat in the room silent.
Oh, no. Yeah, no. And people stayed, which is really good. So, that's good. The dots weren't perfect, but it's all right. I did the best I could. And tried to not have it the same.
Like the critical thinking person goes and says,
Yeah. Trying to keep them from that. You've got 10 minutes or less. 10 minutes or less. Are you good? Yeah. Right on. Okay. Are you guys good?
thing. I'm totally stealing this.
Oh, it's fun, right?
I have to apply it in one of my classes. I don't know where, but I will.
It's fun.
Yeah, it's great.
How you guys doing? Clustering all right? You feel like you're ready? Ready to report out? You got your spokesperson? You guys are good? Okay. Oh, you guys have the big job, I'll tell ya.
Yeah.
Looking at all the boards, you had the roughest.
I think so.
This was our compromised one. I'll give you a little insight. Like, we could not get any movement on, like, skill ones until this one went on the board. Like, this one had to get up there as, like, work for knowledge. And then the others came. But we were deadlocked for a long time. Like, an embarrassingly long time.
Yeah.
Okay.
Does this specifically need to be within the discipline?
You feeling good about it? Some basics? Okay. Awesome. Okay. Good shape. I'll look at the feedback. Where did Dom go? Dom? Can you wear the lavalier? The lavalier, I don't know what it's called. The lavalier. And when each one is going, I'm going to type what they're saying, and then this will capture like the video of it.
So you want it to just follow me? Is that what you're
Yeah, it's going to follow you around the room. So when you go to each group, you'll be like in front, kind of camera, trying to capture a little of them. You don't have to be right on top of them. You can be back a little, so that people can still see them.
This one's interesting. All the science people want quantitative and scientific separate.
They're not all. Well, they are kind of sciencey groups.
That's a very sciencey group.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, they ended up a little sciencey. That's too bad.
That's fine. So am I just going to walk around and you're going to get
once we get moving.
Oh, okay. So are we going to?
We're not there yet. So
okay.
Once we get moving, I'm going to type as we go.
Mm-hmm.
I'll bring my computer up here so I can kind of guide it.
You're going to type as we go? Why don't you just record it and save yourself some trouble?
Well, I guess.
Are we being recorded right now, actually?
You're looking at me, that's why. Don't look at me. Don't look at me.
Tell me where to stand.
You can't escape
Stop
it.
recording.
Okay. All right, we're going to receive the feedback from each of the groups around the room. Again, I want to remind people this does not need to be extensive feedback. I just want to touch a couple of key themes, maybe three key themes from each slide or page, from each page. We want to give people a sense of where this particular outcome might be moving, kind of reshaping, if there is any of that going on. Okay. We don't have to, I'm just going to go in order. So why don't we start? Is it okay if we go with you? Sure. All right. So go watch them. That's the first.
Okay, I'm just going to be lurking so the camera follows me.
You got to face them. Put it on.
Put it on Laura.
Let them know where
You want me to just
You have to follow the thing. It's not following you.
You have to get
You got it.
Hello.
Is it on?
I'm sure there's some teenager with a cell phone that would do this much better than me.
Oh, they hacked into it already.
There we go.
Okay, give it to Laura.
Right, that was our goal, to get that thing to turn.
All right.
So next.
All right.
So our thoughts on this, the groupings kind of came into 5 separate areas that then we started to mesh together.
I'm sorry, can you just read your outcome first so everybody knows?
Oh yeah, scientific and quantitative reasoning. Students will identify topics of inquiry, critically analyze and interpret quantitative and qualitative data, determine its significance, and apply solutions based in evidence. So they'll be getting a master's degree. It seemed a little broad, and it seemed a little like maybe we're aiming for them to identify a topic of inquiry. So are they going to create an experiment? Are they then going to do data on this? How are they going to present all of this? And it seemed like we were chucking a lot of things full. So the groups came up with, separate these two. Are you asking for scientific literacy or quantitative reasoning? So it's one thing to know what basic science is before you graduate. It's another thing to understand what basic science is and collect data and do the reasoning on it. And I would dare say, I think quantitative reasoning doesn't just fall in with science. So potentially separate that. There were a lot of questions regarding, is this just critical thinking, or is this part of critical analysis? What does it mean to identify topics of inquiry? What is a topic of inquiry? There were a lot of issues with topic of inquiry, lots of questions around what that means. And separate data analysis from scientific reasoning, and there was a lot of focus on methodology over here. So how are you going to do this? How are you going to describe the methodology? So maybe it was a little bit broad, but it seems like pushing to tease it out a little bit more and understand it a little bit more.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Okay. And hold your applause.
Yeah, thanks.
All right, so we had critical thinking, which states students will demonstrate the process of critical thinking by carefully and logically analyzing ideas and arguments from multiple perspectives and will develop reasoned solutions to problems. So first off, we have our affirmations. Positives right here. We have a section that's based off of like a need for application. Some people were saying this should be more application-based. We had this section is kind of talking about the different terminology used here, suggestions on how to change it or what they see issues in here. And then this section is talking about how it's generally too broad, very similar to the other one, talking about what exactly does this encompass and can we nail it down a little bit more, because it seems like the majority of courses need or are needing critical thinking in what they're doing.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Scooch over.
You earn your dots. I've never seen a group more dot obsessed. It's crazy.
Okay, so we had closed reading. Students will read complex text closely and demonstrate their ability to analyze, interpret, and comprehend challenging material. So up here we have just questions about defining challenging, and here adding to the definition a little bit. Down here you can see that a lot of the comments included that they viewed overlap, with a comment expressing that there are different skills. And then just a few general comments: love it, essential, keep it as is, and that it's measurable.
Wonderful. Thank you. Okay. Where's your dots?
Thank you.
We had personal and social responsibility. Students will recognize the responsibilities to society, locally, nationally, and globally, and seek opportunities to act on them. We had a couple just affirmations. The three main things were where and how does this overlap with ethical and global. And we discussed on our own, we discussed that a lot. But a lot of people had questions about that, especially with service learning and all the different ways that this overlaps with that other learning outcome. Another one is, a big one was, what does seek mean and how is it assessed? And then a big one was generally, how do we measure this? What is the behavior we want to see was a big question. How we measure it, how we assess it, and then also in terms of Bloom's taxonomy, as Michelle was putting it, what are the different levels of engagement with this learning outcome?
Excellent. Thank you. Okay.
Dots.
Come in.
I might be able to just think.
I got them. We all get them. We all get them. Everybody on the team? Yeah, everybody on the team. All the whole team. Dots. She tried to get more dots, didn't she?
Dots.
You can't blame me. You can't blame me. She's so excited. All right, go ahead.
Ready? So this one deals with civic literacy. Civic literacy, the objective reads, students will demonstrate an understanding of the knowledge, skills, and values necessary for full participation in a civic society. The main themes that came out of this one were that there is some overlap with the personal and social responsibility objective, and similarly that the outcome may be a little bit broad or vague. And so based upon those, the overlap and broad and vague, several really good comments were given as to how this may be made a bit more specific. One theme that kind of came out is trying to define civic society to some extent. And then several very good comments were made with respect to if we're dealing with reasoning, is it ethical reasoning? Is there a legal component to this? Are we dealing with some type of civic engagement? Could that be included? And so I think that despite the fact there's probably overlap with that one, several good comments were made that could probably distinguish it a bit and make it separate.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay. Diversity and difference is up. Here are your dots.
Go ahead, Laura.
All right, we had diversity and difference. Students will demonstrate an understanding of structural, historical, and cultural factors that shape human diversity and difference. The biggest grouping was the idea that this should be combined with or replace or somehow be integrated with the global one. Then we had some definitional changes, so people wanted to replace the word understanding with knowledge and gave some reasons why. Some questions on how do we assess understanding, so replacing that with knowledge. And then we had some additions that people wanted, so adding cognitive and biological factors that shape diversity, and then also including the ideas of institutionalized and systemic, and then also the ideas of power in there as well. And then some people thought that it would be important to actually have training on this, so diversity training, off-campus visits, and those kinds of things to make sure that we're actually doing that. And then things like including empathy and human dignity in that as well.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Okay, here's your desk. I left your desk at your seat.
Oh, okay.
He's my chair.
Are we doing global?
All right.
All right.
All right, we're going to get people are now, if you're okay. So I want to get all of the important.
Okay, so we had ethical reasoning. Students will make reasoned ethical arguments that demonstrate an informed awareness of values, opinions, and beliefs that challenge their ideas. Essentially, we had three themes that emerged. One was, as we heard from others, potentially a merging of learning outcomes coming together. There was some thought that this is very similar to critical thinking, so perhaps there's a merging there or some type of, dare we say, sub-outcome that's available. The word challenge came up. This is a big theme over here as it pertains to the word challenge. So, again, the latter part of the outcome says, and beliefs that challenge their ideas. How do we measure challenging? How do we determine that their ideas are challenged? And then down here, again, kind of some vagueness, as we saw maybe in some others. Important, but this one seems to be a different approach. Great reasoned, how to assess it respectfully, which is important to consider. And then we had just a few outliers in the middle here. What about the morality portion? Consider laws, rules, regulations, and what about discussing?
Great, thank you.
Excuse me.
Okay, and next we have communication.
Okay, so communication. Students will effectively and strategically express ideas orally, visually, and in writing for a range of audiences and purposes. We felt like the comments fell into 4 categories. The largest was a number of comments expressing the absolute essentiality of this one. My personal favorite, describing this as the crux of life. Which I'm glad I finally know what the crux of life is. We had a number of comments just suggesting some wording changes around the terminology. We had a number of comments suggesting the inclusion of other elements in this, especially the digital or multimedia. And finally, some questions about where this learning outcome could be located. Is this something which includes or replaces Comm 101? Is it in the English department? Does it have overlap with other learning outcomes?
Excellent. Thank you. Good work. Okay.
We're going to get out of your way. Let me stand behind this plant.
Yeah. Not status. Honesty about not status.
No one will know I'm here. Mary.
All right. We had knowledge of liberal arts, which is students will acquire foundational knowledge of human cultures and the physical and natural world through studying the sciences and mathematics, social sciences, humanities, histories, languages, and the arts. You'll see that our clusters are not as neat as everybody else's. There's a lot of different. Basically, we had a group saying this is essential, and they focused on the fact that this is a knowledge rather than skills. And then there's some that say that it's duplicative or that it's more of an umbrella term that captures kind of all the rest of the learning outcomes. There were some suggestions for changing the wording in terms of what exactly is the humanities, what exactly is the arts, why were certain areas chosen and not others, and whether these were really the satisfaction would be in every course through this. Let's see. There were a couple other, whether this was something really related to professional skills, and also whether there really should be a self-examination type piece to this.
So lots of different ideas here. Thank you.
All right. Can someone move the camera over? I don't think they're going to be able to catch this.
Wait, maybe I should face this way.
All right.
So we had information literacy, that students will demonstrate the ability to locate, evaluate, and synthesize information and incorporate appropriate sources and perspectives to accomplish a specific purpose. There were many that were saying that it's essential and measurable, this outcome. Some were doing some wordsmithing as well. Some were wondering about overlapping with the scientific learning objectives, but we were arguing that's more data-driven instead of this is primary and secondary information location with sources. So everyone wants to combat fake news. That's good too. So ways that we did it, and also with the acknowledgement of that, how you locate sources and how you use them for a specific purpose. Then it's general across the curriculum, how you want to use it within your classroom of what the purpose is that the student needs. So.
Okay, so that's the 10 that were developed and vetted by the committee. We also wanted to spend some time clustering the Global Education Task Force, and so I've asked the committee to take that one on.
So this one is integrated global knowledge learning outcome. It was drafted a few days ago, I believe. It states, students will demonstrate knowledge and understanding of complex, interdependent historical, political, economic, and cultural contexts within natural and human systems around the world. So a lot of the comments there were about 5 different clusters, but a lot of them dealt with meaning and the clarification of the meaning. So some of them talked about, for example, there are a lot of adjectives here, so can things be clarified a little more? It says a little bit wordy is another comment. There's also the idea that perhaps some of these notions here kind of overlap a lot with the diversity and difference learning outcome. So some people thought that could kind of be, they might be connected together or at least integrated together. There's also a lot of questions about what are legal systems, what are natural systems, a lot of broader questions about what is global and at what level and in what ways and what does that actually mean. So it seems like this one still needs a little more clarification. And of course, last but not least are the 4 lovely post-its of love and praise. But there were a lot of questions about kind of clarification because it's quite a big issue.
Wonderful. Okay. Notice I am not giving the committee docs. And the reason is, as committee members, we really believe that we are representative of the whole and the core. And so our personal opinions, we're trying to hold them to the side and really take the feedback to the faculty. We want to make sure that you understand that we understand our charge and that that's our responsibility as well. All right, so now is the moment you've been waiting for so diligently. What you're going to have an opportunity to do is go around the room and place your dots. Now, to the point that was made earlier, if you want to send your 5 in one area, you can. That's a choice you make. However, you only get 5 dots, right? And you know y'all been honest and not taking extra dots, and I have them up here. So what you want to do is just place your dots. If you could, make sure you're not overlapping a dot. You think it's silly, but I'm like, is this 2 dots? Is this 1? Try to put them at the top or kind of cluster them, if you will, so I can count them when we get down to it. And when you're done, I will let you know, I will be taking all of your dots in your clusters and reviewing some of the things available. Another suggestion, this is kind of a suggestion that we can do it online. So for anybody who was not in the training, we'll probably put together a quick table monthly. So if anybody wants to add additional feedback, they can do it. The other thing was a way to commit to acceptance is we have an opportunity to do this on this. This is the beginning step in the process. So go ahead, go to your dots.
Chill it for a minute.
Life skills, financial literacy, computer literacy type of outcome. So that'll be something that'll be considered by the committee. And the last thing I'll mention is that do we want 10? Do we want 20? Do we want 5? We would like a manageable number. Right now we're at 7++. Is the way we've been describing it in the committee. We want a manageable number that people can wrap their brain around. So whatever we need to do to massage the learning outcomes, the committee will take that on. Thank you guys for being such good participants. And we're going to turn it over to Sean.
Also, please thank Diane. She did all this. A lot of work in pulling this together, and so.
It's on the table.
Oh.
You're on video, Sean.
Oh, fine. Okay. So we have some things we're going to try and do as a committee over the summer, and then work that we're going to do with the faculty in the fall. So just to kind of break this up a little bit, this week, as many of us as can are going to meet with a DQP coach on, is she on Global or on?
She's here at the invitation of the Global Education Task Force.
Okay. So she's meeting with some departments and with the Global Task Force, and our committee is going to try and meet with her as well. So that's something. We'll make notes of this together, available, and we will, as a committee, we'll read through this, digest this, and begin to think about what to do with all of these helpful contributions and making it coherent forward. We were going to want in the fall to bring something back to faculty, but also to students. We want to make sure that whatever learning outcomes, as we phrase them, if a student can read it, the student can understand it. Not necessarily that a first semester freshman can do any of these things necessarily, but that can understand what it is that they're supposed to get by the time they graduate, and make sure the language is clear. So how we would work both of those is something that we would work on, but we'll begin, try and working over the summer on the drafts of this and get back to EPC, faculty, students before we go any further with that. And we want to begin also in the fall trying to put together some possible models of delivery, and we're going to want faculty involvement in the construction of it. So our committee will work over the summer to try and, I think, we're going to sort of clear away a lot of the brush. What is it that the New York State requirements are? What is it that standard definition of general education? How would we envision scaffolding? Sort of clear out some of the theoretical questions, but also some very specific Damon questions. That is, the last thing we want to do is create an ideal general ed model and then find out 3 months into it that the PA and PT departments say, well, our students can't take it, and we're back to square one. So meet with the vice president, meet with the different professional programs, and try and see what are the kind of constraints that we have as we begin thinking about models. We have researched a lot of other models, as well as AAC and U surveys as what's the standard across the country, and we'll try and, we've been using those and we'll continue to try and do those over the summer. So our hope would be to have fairly clear learning outcomes in September, and then spend the fall semester developing a model with the faculty once our committee has kind of set up the guidelines as to what's feasible within the college, and then begin in the spring figuring out how to put it in place and so on. Yes.
This sounds petty, but I imagine a lot of people are thinking this. Is this going to come down to another situation where we're essentially proposing and applying for permission to use these learning objectives, or are we going to trust the faculty? Do I have to resubmit all my classes again?
As the core director who would have to read them all, I hope not. I think that we're going to be careful not to have sort of a replication of the competency base just around these. We will have to figure a way forward in terms of creating it. But one of the things that I would say is, in terms of, I did a fair amount of reading so far on what a general education course should be. We have bucket loads of them already in place. The people have been teaching for years, and they have learning outcomes, and they've got assignments lined up to them. So I don't want to speak for the committee, but certainly we don't want to make everybody's life miserable. We also want to have a fairly clear idea of scaffolding, so that right now we have either in or out, and we want to avoid that. So the question is, less who fits in the curriculum, which would be everyone, but where do people fit in the curriculum? And I think that's something that we want to
Yeah, another thing I wanted to emphasize, because I was the one who said this earlier, we're not setting these up in such a way where courses need to satisfy a particular one or two or three, like with the competency, which I think is what you're addressing. These are, no matter what you do, at the end of, by the time you leave Damon, we want to be able to assess all of these and determine if students can or cannot do that. We're not going to say, okay, in order for your course to be in the core, does it satisfy knowledge of the liberal arts or whatever. We're not taking that approach again. We'll do some scaffolding to where we might have to do something like that, but that's not the outcome of these. These are specifically to determine what the major goal of coming to Damon is for us.
So if I can just add to that too, I think when we talk about scaffolding, we talk about introductory, reinforcing, and proficient. So your course may be now approved for a certain competency, but it may then be approved for an introductory level course with respect to the learning outcomes, or, so there will be some decisions that need to be made about where courses fit. But I think that, and Sean's going to talk about this too, the model of how this will roll out, we're not there yet. We're just saying, where do we want students to be in the end?
Right. And we also want participation in this whole scaffolding process, and we want input. Just like today, it is not our committee that is going to decide. We want it to be a highly collaborative process with all faculty members. But we also don't want to get bogged down in minutia. And I think that was what we learned from Carlow College. They had a very structured process, such like you saw today that Diane did, and they were able to change their core in 1 year. I'm not saying we will, but but certainly we do not want this dragging out for 3-4 years. Absolutely not.
So does this mean, right now, professional courses are blocked from submitting new courses to the core? And I'm wondering, is that block going to continue so that none of the Health and Human Services courses can be submitted to the core until spring of 2018 or fall of
Well, we'll have to figure that out.
I'm sorry, I'm going to respond to that because I know that's something that's been a concern of my division that a lot of people have mentioned. And I think we have to look at this a little bit differently in the sense that it may not be that there's a need to get approved in terms of a particular competency, because that may not be the way we go, but we're certainly going to look at all of the professional programs in terms of how they're going to help students to achieve that proficient level in these student learning outcomes.
Right, but does that mean we'll still be blocked until this is all...
Oh, I'm sorry, yeah.
Yeah, that's the question. Because right now, Health and Human Services can't submit any courses for consideration before. And so then my question is, is this something that's going to continue through the point of implementation now, which could be a year or two?
I guess that decision hasn't been made, Michelle, but I do think that we have to be cautious in terms of any new approvals at this point, unless it's critical for students.
Right, at this point, it's just simply Health and Human Services block.
Yes, I think. Yes.
Cautious. I just think that we made a decision somehow that it's Health and Human Services is going to be blocked. And I just wonder how long that's going to last.
Well,
I don't know.
EPC can pick that up with that.
Yeah. I think your point is well taken. I think your question is a very good one. And I think probably it is something that the EPC will have to take up. But I'm not sure that at this point, and this is only my opinion, so it's certainly not going to, I'm not the final say in any way, shape, or form, but at this point I think we want to be somewhat cautious about doing any more approvals for core competencies, because they may cease to exist once this new thing is in place. Yes. That would certainly be my sense. Yes.
That would be up to you to say. Yeah, speaking to the point that Dom made before, and working just with the 10 items that are, 10 or 11 items that are up here right now, and I know that may be reduced somehow in the future, or perhaps even added to later on, but it sounds like there are certain areas, for example, one over there about the liberal arts, that is not as amenable to what Dom was describing before, as opposed to critical thinking, where the idea of introduce, reinforce, and master would work a lot better. Right? And I think that when we heard the presentations by the spokespersons for the groups, that was one of the things
point out from some of them that there is some of these might be thinking of as foundational, which is one of the criticisms that we had under the, of the current core, and that those are more amenable to that kind of approach, and other ones might be very different. For example, going back to what Laura was mentioning about scientific and quantitative reasoning, if that is reduced to something which is manageable for an undergraduate, for say doing the first or second year, as opposed to, what is it that Laura said, a master's student, then that could easily also become that you take X number of credits in a science, the way that you have, let's say, with the SUNY General Ed program. So I think what Dom said applies really well to some of these. I'm not sure it applies to all of them, even in its present.
And I think that was brought up at the committee too, Bob, and so I think that's a very good point. And that's one of the reasons, I don't know where that one is, but anyways, that's one of the reasons we put foundational in there. Because you're right, and that's one of the things that I think those of us who are coming from the professional programs said, we may very well have transfer students who come in the junior year who also need to achieve these learning outcomes, and how can we assure that? And so that is something we definitely need to look at, but it's also the reason we put foundational.
And we also need to look at, as we go forward, one of the things our committee would need to identify is resources in terms of, do we have the staff to teach it? Do we have the number of courses available? If we're going to say all students need to have sort of smattering in this and some intentionality here, do we have enough of each of these and the resources and books? So those are all issues that need to take place. But how these get delivered is a separate question. And that's really, the full conversation will be in the fall, but we need to try and identify what are the things that we need to be aware of as we construct that in the summer. John and then Erica.
So I know you say you have this in the fall, but to my mind there's two ways we could roll this out. One is if it's a learning outcome, then really it should be tied to assessment rather than individual courses.
Right.
Or we're going to go with the older model of just we'll tie them arbitrarily to courses regardless of how they're assessed. And I think how we choose to roll it out will mean that we can tackle the transfer student situation very differently.
Right. Erica?
My question is procedural, and so it may be getting ahead of where we are right now. But in terms of the committee moving forward, I see a lot of opportunities for faculty input, which is great. I'm just wondering whether the committee anticipates that most of that review piece is going to happen through elected bodies like EPC and CAFE, or whether this is going to be a kind of larger faculty conversation.
Probably a little of both. I mean, we are we're elected, but it was EPC that recommended it, so certainly we have the responsibility to report back to EPC. It probably depends on the issue. I mean, for trying to put together some parts of it, it might be best to go through just EPC. My preference would be as much input as possible from many ways, as long as it's functional.
If I could jump in on that, we mentioned briefly the Carlow University model, which is so we went to a conference at an ANC&U conference in Arizona, and Carlow University put forward their model. And we're going to try and adhere to that somewhat. And they really put a lot of emphasis on transparency and faculty input. So this, and I'm making assumptions of Freddie alone, but I'm pretty sure we don't want this to be the last time we
No, not at all.
We want to have more review. EPC is definitely going to come in, swoop in at some point. There's nothing we can do about it. But anyway, but we definitely want to have other meetings such as this. There, Diane, there will be stickers, right? So we'll have more dots. So we want to have as much faculty input as we can.
Can we get a general idea of the Carlow model? If I just go on their website, will I be able to get something?
Yes, it is on their website, and we sort of have struggled with this because once you look at a model, then we ask you to be creative in terms of what a Damon model might look like. Then it sort of colors what you might put into our model.
Yeah.
So we've sort of gone back and forth about whether or not we should share that model. But if you look on websites of most colleges, they do give some sort of description of their model for general education. So I would strongly encourage you to look at those because I think it will help to inform us as we move forward.
Right. And I think, though, what we were the most impressed with was the process they went through. The end result was good and it worked for them. And what we're hoping is we'll get one that is equally good it and works for us. And scaffolding certainly was a key, and I think that will be essential to ours. But the process they went through, there were 4 of us that attended that. We were just so impressed with how it worked and how it moved along, but it got faculty input. So that is really what we're using. We're modeling more the process than the actual learning outcomes that were resulting from that.
Any other?
Oh, just in terms of scaffolding, I see the critical thinking, there was a lot of discussion about needing application, and so and everyone's talking about scaffolding, which sounds great. Are we talking about scaffolding in terms of Bloom's taxonomy, where it's, understanding and then ultimately application, or is that what we mean? And what do we mean by scaffolding?
I think Bloom's taxonomy can certainly play a role in terms of how we scaffold, but I think generally, and we've actually, believe it or not, done this in mapping our current core. I'm not sure that people follow it, but each department, and maybe most departments, maybe not each, but have actually mapped the current core in terms of introductory, reinforcing, and I don't know if we called it competent or proficient, but yes, I think that at that proficient level, you would certainly see more application.
Well, thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
She said it's kind of eerily disconcerting.